Do you remember looking up into the brilliant blue sky, watching cumulus clouds slowly pass overhead as you made out shapes and silhouettes? Rare are the days when you can look up and make out those obscure objects and images. Today we see aircraft spraying trails miles long that turn into thin, wispy, translucent clouds, painting a pale, pasty opaque into the atmosphere as sunlight struggles to shine through the surrounding saturation of chemical compounds. I'm talking about aerosol injections, of course, otherwise known as chemtrails. They're part of the Weather Modification Initiative. While chemtrails and weather modification have been known to those rarefied few who are immersed in truth and investigative circles, the topic remains largely esoteric to virtually anyone else, and anyone outside of those circles might not appreciate or recognize the following example of soft disclosure. In theory, the idea is simple. Lower the temperature of the clouds and scientists could weaken a hurricane or even alter its path. In one scenario, airplanes would spread a layer of soot into the icy clouds at the top of a storm system, cooling them further and slowing the winds. Cut those wind speeds even a little, scientists say, and the devastating power of a storm surge could be drastically cut, perhaps saving lives and property. While there's a ranging list of varying information pertaining to this geoengineering campaign, it's important to note just what these chemtrails are. Also known as, get ready for it, stratospheric aerosol injections, solar radiation management, solar geoengineering, upper atmospheric modification, and cloud seeding. These trails are chemical aerosol sprays coming from mostly private, perhaps military jets and planes. Although they can look similar, aerosol injections are not to be confused with condensation trails. A common observer can differentiate the difference. Unlike condensation trails, aerosol injections remain visible in the sky for hours and often expand, frequently forming artificial clouds from horizon to horizon, while contrails quickly effervesce and disperse behind aircraft as the condensation evaporates. Depending on who you ask, 10 to 20 million tons of potentially poisonous chemicals and nanoparticle-sized heavy metals that include aluminum, barium, strontium, chaff, which is aluminum-coated fiberglass, thorium, cadmium, mold spores, mycotoxins, uranium, iron, and magnesium are dumped into the atmosphere each year. Populated areas are sprayed almost daily with increased frequency during sunrise and sunset. Independent investigators travel to sites that report heavy chemtrailing to test the soil and water, often to find harmful elements at disturbingly high levels. Unfortunately, these results aren't generally accepted or published unless performed by a government-sanctioned organization or university, though the equipment and process is virtually identical. Researchers and producers G. Edward Griffin, Paul Wittenberg, and Michael Murphy all collaborated to produce a groundbreaking documentary called What in the World Are They Spraying? This riveting, informative film provides a presentation of documented evidences and findings from multiple independent investigators and freelance researchers relating to the topic of chemtrails. The idea is to deflect the sun's rays by utilizing reflective metals as aerosol ingredients. However, there seems to be a connection, at least a tangential connection, linking both wildfires and drought to these ingredients. Nanoparticles of certain metals, notably aluminum, one of the incendiary ingredients of thermite, causes fires to ignite more readily and burn more rapidly. The aerosol sprays can also contain compounds that act as a desiccant, absorbing moisture from the open air, which inhibits the hydrogen bond, drastically reducing rainfall. The artificial clouds they create can reduce sunlight by as much as 25 to 30%, blocking out the sun, encouraging the subsidence of both photosynthesis and evaporation, which further increases the impact on ecosystems and regular precipitation. As citizens, we should be urging officials to conduct health risk assessments and a full inquiry regarding these aerosol sprays, as some of the heavy metals and chemicals contained in these sprays are endocrine disruptors that wreak havoc on entire human and animal immune systems. The potential health impacts could be devastating. The size of the nanoparticles allow the heavy metals to remain suspended for substantial periods of time, essentially turning the clouds in the sky into a conductive interface medium. These particulates can operate in conjunction with any antenna array capable of ionizing or pulsing the suspended medium. The metals eventually descend and are ingested or inhaled and accumulate in the body, turning you into an interface medium, since virtually anything conductive has the potential to serve as an antenna. These frequency technologies associated with chemtrails were largely derived from over-the-horizon radar developed in the radiation lab at the Mare Island Institute of Technology. Over-the-horizon radar is able to remotely sense and detect objects at vast distances through interfacing pulses and streams of electromagnetic energy along various layers of the atmosphere, specifically the stratosphere and ionosphere. Peter A. Kirby, the author of Chemtrails Exposed, the New Manhattan Project, details a host of information encompassing the genesis of these mechanisms, as well as other sophisticated tools that were adapted to be used within the context of geoengineering. This parallel to the Manhattan Project is derived from the intended secrecy of the chemtrail operation and the development of clandestine weapons technology. The U.S. alone has over 100 patents that relate specifically to technology linked to chemtrails and chemtrail spraying, but both for your sake and my own, I'll only list 3 and invite you to look into the rest for yourself. Patent number 1. Systems have been devised for steering a beam of electromagnetic energy radiated from an antenna array in which the various antenna elements are phased by means of computers so as to provide a coherent signal in a given direction. Patent number 2. An object of the invention is that of providing an apparatus for atomizing liquids and discharging the same in predetermined quantities over dense areas, utilizing the force of air currents through a venturi to produce a jetting action on the diffused liquids and direct them over a wide area in the wake of an aircraft equipped with a suitable number of the apparatus. Patent number 3. One of the objects of the invention is to provide a rocket-boosted vehicle that comprises 2 separable bodies, one of which serves as a pyrotechnical booster element and the other as a seeding material carrier, referred to therein as the payload or dart element that delivers the material to the clouds to be seeded. Here's something I found relevant from Dr. Ian Sandra of globalsearch.ca. The U.S. military has been spraying chemical and biological weapons in open-air testing over civilian populations since the 1940s. They are called vulnerability tests. This is not a controversial statement. The military has admitted to this practice on many occasions, and there's plenty of documentation from the government to corroborate it. There is also documentation of intentional experimental releases of radiation on civilian populations. Unfortunately, this information tends to surface long after it could have saved lives or eased the suffering of victims. There really is no way to legally or morally justify the toxification of our air, waterways, and agricultural regions. As people notice the climate unraveling, and it is unraveling, they begin to seek answers. The singular diagnosis, of course, is climate change. Boldly, I propose that an adjacent threat to our ecosystem and environment is the various weather manipulation and geoengineering projects, not so much the emissions from our tailpipes, and unless we start bringing that into the conversation, we will continue to wage an incomplete argument.